Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United show. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brand, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. I've been missing for a couple of weeks, as most of you know. I'm having to do this through my AirPods, as I am obviously technically illiterate, way more than what I thought. I never thought just wiring up and connecting a microphone would be so difficult. Anyway, Jamesy, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing well. And how about yourself now?
Better now. 2 weeks for the last couple of weeks, it was rough. Life happens, Jamesy. Just
Yep.
in many ways, it's a reminder of how fragile life is, and it makes you reappraise your worries and anxieties and the things that matter. And when you're younger, you don't think about your mortality, but when you get older, you do. And yeah, was just a rough couple of weeks, mate. But we had lots of power outages with the fires too, and but it's great to be back. A lot has happened since it was last away.
Yeah, it has. It's hard to remember. It feels like when talking about United, it's hard to remember like past 3 days because beyond that, it's like so much happens every day that your brain
Yeah.
gets full and it like discards stuff that happened 2 weeks earlier.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't all remember everything, but I do know that somehow we've magically managed to resume our podcast off the back of 2 wins, despite everything,
Yeah.
which wouldn't have been the case at certain points in doing this all. So that's good. That's good. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, I mean that definitely a positive. Plus, there's just so much to talk about. Obviously, we'll talk about
Yeah.
the Jim Ratcliffe stuff that happened after the game. We'll talk a little bit about the new stadium if we can fit it in. I want to ask you about Ruben Amorim's Marcus Rashford comments,
Yeah.
and of course Rasmus Højlund is coming under enormous scrutiny. And we'll talk a little bit about other potential transfers in Garnacho, Dorgu, possibly some others, and we'll try to squeeze in also a bit of a conversation about what happened against Rangers with tickets, and United fans' understandable anger over tickets being sold in the wrong end. It's not an attack on Rangers fans. I don't blame them for doing it. It's an attack on United for doing what they said they didn't do against Galatasaray. But good, decent one yesterday away to Fulham.
Yes.
Wasn't the game that I was overly optimistic about after the Rangers' performance. Poor performance again against Fulham, to be fair. I was thinking when Fernandez took that shot, um, or sorry, Martinez took that shot. When was the last time United had a shot on target from open play in a Premier League game? Because the previous
Feel like
Premier
it's been
League
a while.
game, Brighton, the only
Yeah.
shot on target was Bruno Fernandez.
Yeah.
And I stole some stats, James, from the Talk of the Devils podcast. So I want to give due credit here. Laurie Whitwell, of course, put these in the Talk of the Devils podcast. So want to make sure we give proper accreditation. These stats are astonishing that I almost didn't believe when I heard them. Rasmus Højlund has 12 shots throughout the entire Premier League season. That puts him in the same bracket as Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Joe Aribo, Nathan Collins, etc. Uh, Højlund is 108th in the league for touches in the box. Xerxes is 77th um, for in the Premier League for XG. Højlund is 108th XG. Xerxes is 77th. Touches in the box, okay, 33 for Rasmus Højlund, 248 for Mo Salah.
Mm-hmm.
I know Salah is the opposite end of the spectrum. James, Højlund deservedly took criticism for his performance yesterday, but this is a really hard team to excel in if you're a striker.
It is, and part of the problem is at the moment is where, because right now what the team is benefiting from more, understandably, is when Xerxes coming on and helping to kind of build, build play up to help kind of get possession to control the game. Against Rangers, for example, I thought again we did not create much, we didn't create loads. We actually had some good chances, but we didn't create loads. But we controlled the game very well. We were able to get a lot of possession, things like that. When Xerxes came on against Southampton, he really changed that game. That was going really poorly from that point on for United to have some. Not scoring goals, mind you, but essentially just in providing, you're not getting service in the box, not for scoring goals, but essentially in providing an extra man who assists in the build-up play and United getting that possession and getting that control at the back. And they're definitely as a team, I don't know what you would call it, but they're definitely as a team needing that a bit more right now. Because without it, they tend to just get stuck entirely. But in terms of the scoring the goals and getting it in the box, I mean, we just don't do that for anybody. It's not something that we do. There's no player who's going to get a lot of touches in the box. You put them in the team right now, it's not going to happen. And they're not going to get it. And so, we're essentially looking at strikers at the moment, and their performances have to mostly be judged on the basis of how they're helping the rest of the game, not what you would hope a striker would be spending more time doing, which is trying to find a goal in the box and in the area. So it's obviously a major problem, and I'm not particularly surprised by it. It's pretty bad, but I'm not particularly surprised by it. The team is, I mean, it's not that it hasn't been a problem for a long time, because it has. We've really not been a good team at creating consistent chances for years now.
I mean, Højlund's defense, though, which I will
Yeah.
say, when City were in that horrendous run, Holland wasn't scoring goals,
Yeah.
wasn't getting touches in the box, right? I think he went a couple of months without scoring. And I was looking at that and saying that's what Holland would look like in the United team. Now you're talking about probably the best finisher in world football, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going, I don't care how good your striker is. If you don't create chances, they can't score goals. It's just as
For
simple as
sure.
that.
For sure.
And so I'm not. There's other parts of Højlund's game that undoubtedly he has to improve upon. Your hold of play has to be better. I think his pressing is lethargic. I think he could definitely give United more in that sense. His movement at times is not the best, and but I think there's a very good player in there. I mean, what I don't understand about Højlund when we're talking about his hold up play, Højlund's fast.
Yeah.
I don't want my striker getting the ball to feet around the halfway line, or just inside my own half. If my striker is getting the ball I want my striker chasing balls over the top into the channels, put defenders on the back foot, and give yourself a chance. But if you're picking the ball up, in the halfway line, and you want to hold it up, lay it back, and that's not where you want a player like Rasmus Højlund. And to me, I think obviously there's confidence issues there. Of course, he's not the finished article. I think all things being equal, he is a better striker than Xerxes. I think Xerxes is more effective at the minute because he is someone that genuinely drops deep, and so much of how United play doesn't happen in the final third. So, if you've got someone that drops deep, it gives you that extra number ahead of an attacking midfielder and a striker where he drops deep and gives. Then you start to see a noticeable difference. But the goal threat's still not really there, and that's the
Correct.
problem.
Yes, totally.
So if I look at United, James, I see a team that can't control the game, can't control possession, that have basically one or two ways to score. It's the 4-5 fucking mad you do something up top formation, right? Hopefully bail us out with a bit of skill, create something out of nothing, hope the opposition makes a mistake, get something off a set piece. But United aren't going to control possession and cut you open with precise passing, and there's no chemistry. It's just, you look at that team, and I said this before on Twitter, I always feel like they're playing with like 9 men. There always seems to be players open for the opposition that find space, that beat the press really easy. When they attack, they have good numbers. They never seem outnumbered in midfield. They never seem outnumbered in defence. But United always seem on the wrong end of these things. I watch United attack, and it's the same attack. It's sidewards, backwards passing, slow, slow, slow. then one of the centre backs pings a ball over the top. They're going to go left, go right, or down the middle. But there's no one going through, boom, quick passing, midfield, transitions, and then cut you open. I understand that's the hardest part to perfect of the system, but it's turgid because they don't build momentum, they don't build pressure. They're relying on the opposition to make mistakes. And when you are playing like that, I think it's very, very difficult to, if you're a central striker, to be effective.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that it needs to. There's definitely improvements there. For the most part, the biggest problem that we've continued to see from United for some time, that's been an issue pretty much for every manager, and is the primary things that need to be connected, is that all the time we see them playing where we say that because there's different skill sets, obviously. There's different things that people bring to the table. There's different, what are players good at and all of that, naturally, and fitting them into the right team. And you look at it and you see that every manager has virtually had to deal with 2 or 3 positions where there's just nobody who does the job that they'd actually want from that position, because there's just no skill set for it, And I think it's pretty obvious in United's case when we look at this, because of, who they've been chasing all window, essentially, or looking to get done here, and be, since essentially Shaw has been unable to play for 2 years now, almost, that we're running up on, which is that left side. I mean, it was really apparent against Fulham how awkward it got on the left side of the attack. It was really uncomfortable, and Amorim commented on it himself about he doesn't really know what to do with Garnacho as of yet, positionally. That's not to say he doesn't like him. It's just he doesn't really know what to do with him positionally. We ended up with this sort of odd thing of Mazraoui on the left side, who's not left-footed, and as well, and he was like inverting and playing in the midfield again and running up into the attacking areas, but he's not good at that. I think he was really poor in that position as well. The runs, the movement, the play, just it's not natural to any of them, and then it's not the same on both sides, and it gets confused, and it's kind of a mess. It's kind of a mess in that respect of just there's not a balance that you want where everything can be second nature, because it's so different based on who's playing that there you can't. It's hard to build up that what would you call it? Just the instinctual thing. Where someone's
the
going to be.
chemistry.
Yeah,
the chemistry. Whenever you don't, I know,
because there's no consistency, and interestingly, I think you're starting to see it a little bit out of the back three, who I thought were very good. Yesterday, the back three center backs. And then when Yoro came on for De Ligt, I thought they were very good as well. They were better on their lines. They were better on, they were catching Fulham offsides a good amount. The chemistry between Maguire, De Ligt, Yoro, and Lissandro playing regularly, consistently, in the same positions has improved a lot, I think, since they started. There's fewer errors, in most games. There's fewer errors. There's more control. I think they were really good against Fulham's forwards last night. I think they were very good at shutting them down, at preventing things. They weren't letting in, runners in behind. They weren't out of sorts. They weren't pressing at the wrong time. And of course, Lissandro has been popping up recently, which I think Amorim wants out of that left center back position, to attack, getting that pass against Rangers for the goal to Bruno, and then the goal from the exact same spot.
Yep.
Against Fulham. It's obviously an idea, but that's chemistry. That's doing the same thing over and over and knowing where to go, where to be, that allows you to do those extra things that take you the next level up. And I think that's building. I think the midfield play has been building too. The rotation between Ugarte and Collier has been really good. Ugarte had a good game, made a pretty heavy tackle on Adama Traore because it was the only thing he could do at that point in time. And I think he'll be fine, but that definitely looked like that would hurt. But Collier's come on, he's got legs. He does the job. He fits. He great clearance off the line from him to keep United in a game off of a corner, to keep the win, to save the 3 points really there. And you see that chemistry's kind of building. But in the other areas, it's still like we're trying to, not enough players, not the right fits for players. And it's all kind of chaotic still, trying to figure out what is going to work best with the tools that you have. which is good, but it's not the ideal. It's, you want to have the right tools rather than trying to, put square pegs in round holes. And there's a few things that would definitely solve that, but that's what I see, especially in the front three. It's chopping, it's changing, it's adjusting every week. The wing backs, it's like, is it Ahmad? You can tell he would probably rather play Ahmad on right wing back. We've had really good performances there, but then what do you do in the front three? Because
Yeah,
then
you
you,
need him
you
in the
don't have
final
any
third.
options. So it's like, it's a mess. It really, just because we just don't have the options, for a variety of different reasons, which we'll talk about. But
I
that's
mean,
what I
to
see
me,
is a problem for
it's
sure.
unforgivable. I know Time Malacia is back, but obviously, Ruben Amorim, I don't think is hugely convinced by Malacia. But to me, a football club that says it doesn't have an obvious left back. I mean, we've been talking about some of these. If you look at, and you brought up a point that made me think, if you look at a lot of United managers,
Yeah.
they've always had to deal with some glaring issue that United
Yes.
haven't addressed. You need a striker, didn't get one. You look at some of the stuff Mourinho didn't get, needed centre, wasn't given the centre backs that he needed. Solskjaer wasn't given, Solskjaer wanted Bellingham, wanted, Holland, didn't get any of these players. Ranić wanted the striker in January, didn't get them. This is all a consequence of United having the wrong priorities. And, everything is about just finish top four. Okay, we're not in the market for the best players. Just get a player that can do the job. That's and get you to the end of the season. And that'll do. And we're now at the end stage of the Glazer tax that's been imposed on United. The Glazer ownership, the full weight consequence of it is staring us right in the face.
Yep.
That is unfortunately resulting in United having to make decisions that really are a disgrace for a football club to be in this type of need.
Yep.
It's not a disgrace to sell a young player like Garnacho, James. That's part of life. But why you need to sell him is.
Yes.
And that is, and what annoys me is the protagonist of that will benefit from any dividend United get from being run financially responsibly or any success. And so the architects of this situation are sitting right there beside you. And their answer is go charge more for tickets. Anyway, we'll get to that point. So to me, I think, Amorim is was dealing with, a team that's not equipped to match expectation that is United are obviously, as a consequence of their history, the culture of the football club, the standards that they're being held to, that they're just not capable of delivering on. But what was interesting? Well, I thought about this. I'm like, okay, so you go for Ruben Amorim. Now you have a football department that's supposed to know what it's doing. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm just trying to get a theory of mind here. And I'm like, okay. So obviously you would know that Ruben Amorim plays a very different system than Erik ten Hag. And, based on the players that you have, you're going to need to go out and bring players in for this guy to be successful. Okay. So it looks like to me they didn't plan on bringing players in January. I don't know what they expected from this guy. I don't know what they expected from this team and what they thought he could. United were 4 points off top four when Amorim took over, right? But I don't understand why you hire a guy and then on his first transfer window go, we need to sell Dubai, man. What was the discussion? We'll give you players in the summer. I mean, I don't understand what their commitment to him was. I would be surprised if Ruben Amorim looked at that and said, "Okay, I'm good with not getting players in January," and or else we're going to have to sell big players, which puts United at a massive disadvantage because that desperation increases as you get closer to the deadline window, which is why I think the likes of Chelsea are waiting on Garnacho and they're going to exploit United's desperation to get him out, which is then going to make it almost impossible to get a meaningful replacement in January. Do you want to get a meaningful replacement for Garnacho at the last minute in January? Or do you want to leave out to the summer, but you can't afford to leave out this summer? And you're also making a commitment to the next coach that comes in after Amorim that he's going to play exactly this way. And this is
Mhm.
not a massively used system in football. I mean, it's not rare, but it's very specific to Amorim. It's like, to me, um, I mean, if you're a player from Manchester United, there's so much turnover. It's so tumultuous. Your relationship with your employer must be horrendous. They're putting out stuff that every player's for sale. They're really putting out quite negative things about their players, which I don't understand. They've communicated horrendously with the fans. Ineos all have to take responsibility for United's sporting performance. The Glazers must be sitting back going, "This is wonderful. You're getting the blame for all the cuts. You're getting the blame for United being shit.
Mhm.
You're getting the blame for having to make decisions that were put upon you because of how we run the football club. And we don't get any criticism anymore. It's all yours."
Mhm. Yeah. It's a nice setup for them, and of course, we'll go into that in a minute. But on Amorim, I mean, there's a couple of things to this. One, he would have preferred to take over in summer. I think we kind of heard a lot of that in but at the hiring that they had to convince him, and I think this was a part of it. He commented publicly. I think it was right at the end of December that to journalists asking, he said, our financial position. We can't spend money in January. And he's continued to say it. And then it's adjusted a little bit. I don't think he went into it with eyes closed. I do think he has, well, I pretty much know he has about as solid a commitment as you can get that this isn't going to reflect poorly on him. The fact that they're unable to do a bunch of business in January and things like that, that it's not going to reflect poorly on him, that they know where he's kind of being left
He's
with
wrong,
and without
James.
tools. Well, from
I mean, you
them,
saw it at Fulham
as
yesterday.
from employers, though,
The honeymoon's over. Well, but from players, but from fans, you heard it at Fulham yesterday.
Yeah, I
The
know,
honeymoon is over.
but fans gotta deal with it. Fans have to deal with it with the manager in this respect. I mean,
Well, no, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about Amorim. I'm talking about
yeah, no, 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 no.
Ratcliffe's
I
relationship
mean,
with the fans.
he's
Sorry.
going
Oh,
Amorim
sorry, I
himself.
misunderstood what you were saying.
It's all
Sorry,
good. It's all
sorry,
good.
sorry, sorry.
Amorim
Yes, you're
himself
correct. Yes, you're
will
correct.
will
Sorry,
not.
sorry,
It will
sorry.
not reflect. And I think everybody knows that. You know that. That's
Yes,
why you're
sorry.
saying it,
Yes, you're
right?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Fans know that. Everybody he's backed. He has no concerns. He's not going to worry about his job for the end of the season. Like,
100%. Yeah, yeah,
he's
100%.
safe.
Yes, of course.
So there's conditions he'd
And they were
agreed to.
brilliant with him yesterday. The fans were amazing
Yes.
with Amorim
Yeah.
yesterday.
And
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
and you
You're right.
can see he's got everybody can see the problems, right? So we can all see it's not Amorim's issue right now, and it was way too early to judge anything really that he's doing,
Of
because
course,
whether
yes.
he makes mistakes or not, again, it's like he's being forced into the position
Mm.
to pick a right footer at left wing back. He's being forced to pick this player there because he doesn't have a choice, and so I think it's a confounding of issues, which is number one, that I mean, there's issues that were unpredicted, like Marcus Rashford's current situation and predicament at
Hmm.
United was unpredicted when Ruben Amorim came in. He was in his team. And one of the things that has had a significant knock-on effect on the team selections as well as the performance, when he first joined, he put Ahmad at wing back, to get the balance that he wanted. He had Rashford very often up front. He had Mason Mount up front in many games. They were starting. That's two more choices in the front line of very good players, Rashford and Mount, who actually performed quite well for him in those first 2 or 3 weeks. Um, Now, maybe one could have predicted that Mason Mount would get injured again after last season, but it's still unfortunate. It's still a player you had that you
Yeah.
were at least using, getting to train with, work with, all of that suddenly is gone. And Rashford in a similar situation for different reasons. But you have that. And so I think that, those have contributed to almost a perfect storm of things happening. Now, I think United have done okay. They have to get a deal done 100%. They have to. Like, I think this is purely on them now to get a deal done for a left wing back because it is so desperately needed. They've done all right to do things that we weren't able to do, like shifting Anthony out on loan, which saves a little bit of money, which helps to go towards that funding. Doing little things like extending Maguire's contract by a year, which actually has this interesting effect on PSR and how that all works. That actually saves them a few million to spend this. And so they still have to get this done, this Dorgu thing, because it's very clearly their top target. They've made 2 bids. They're writing a third one. it is one of these. It is probably that we talk about every manager's had to deal with that glaring thing. This is that glaring thing. This left side, it's a joke. It's been a mess for 3 years now. We have not had someone consistently there for maybe longer to play on that side. I mean, even you go back to Ollie and Jose, they're using Ashley Young over there, because and Brandon Williams has to come in before he's ready and play because we just haven't had a left back. It's like, it's mind blowing how bad that has been. But so they've got to get something done to make that happen. But I look at it and I think, again, a lot of it is, comes down to a consequence. One of the positives I will say about it that I don't think is necessarily a fair critique, where I think they did do quite well, is their summer business, for the most part. Matthias de Ligt has been a really good player for us, and he's one of the players that Ruben Amorim likes a lot. So he's been able to make it from one manager to the next without it being an issue, right? Ugarte has obviously been key to Ruben Amorim. Xerxes, it's a little bit up in the air there. Lenny Yora, we know why they bought him. He's going to fit any manager if he develops into the talent that they want him to be. So on that front, I don't think it was like a wasted summer in that respect, like some people may look at it as, because they got a lot of good players in that will continue to play for Ruben Amorim despite the change in manager and all of that. So, but they need more. And I hope that they do need to get this deal done. There's no doubt about that.
I think they will get it done.
Dorgu,
I mean, I think when you're,
yeah,
I think if there was no possibility of getting the deal done, whether we're just too far apart, they wouldn't be at this point. There's a confidence that they can reach common ground and get it done. You're talking about a young left back, no Premier League experience. It's a big ask to go in. I mean, I remember when Patrice Evra came to United in January, it took a while to adapt. It's not the best environment right now. And then there's the other question, to be fair to the defenders, James, that is increasingly imposing itself and needs to be asked. This is what about this goalkeeping situation, because
there's that too.
Onana obviously have strengths, James. Right? And we've seen him pull off some outstanding saves. But you're Manchester United goalkeeper, you should have strengths, right? Now, in Onana's defence, I mean, look at Jack Butland the other night. Look at Sanchez yesterday for Chelsea. Every week, every time I watch football, I'm watching goalkeepers drop the most unbelievable
clangers. It's like, what are these guys doing?
What happened to keepers?
Days?
It's every week someone's throwing a ball in that they could. I mean, I even go back to Arsenal's penalties, the United Arsenal penalties, and Raya.
He's like off near the post before the ball's been kicked. Yeah, it's like,
it reminded me when I was sniffing Dumpstart, when I was sniffing glue, just a little bit off the pace, just seeing things a bit late. I'm like, what is this guy doing? And I'm like, this is bizarre. This is like, so it's not easy to go out and get good goalkeepers, but when you have a goalkeeper, Onana's going through the same thing, nervous, right? And when you're nervous, you have anxiety, the simplest things are the hardest things.
Yeah.
Because they're the things that, my language, don't fuck us up, don't make a mistake. Like when Dowell beats around the goalkeeper at West Ham, he's an open net. Sometimes they're the worst chances to fall to your feet when you have no confidence, because they're so easy. You massively overthink them, and you're so nervous about getting it wrong. The mistake that Onana made against Brighton was unacceptable at this level.
Yep.
And Massimo Taibi lost his United career for 2 or 3 of these. And I'm going, how do you build, if you're a defender, your goalkeeper doesn't come off the line, his positive attribute of distribution from his feet is no longer the best because he's pinging it long and it comes back all the time. Or he takes way too long when he's got the ball at his feet. It makes me nervous that he's going to lose possession. I think in his defense, playing out from the back is massively over fetishized, and I think that it's risky. But I'm looking at this going, you need a goalkeeper you can trust. And when Addison got injured at City, you remember the whole Ortega, Guardiola grabbing him, I think he made the mistake against Brentford, I think it was. If you don't have a quality goalkeeper, comes off his line, that dominates his 6-yard box at the very least, dominates his box, comes for corners, because there's a significant number of the corners United were conceding. I felt Onana could be physically more imposing.
Yes.
He's, so I'm like, the nervousness that's in United's defending when you have a goalkeeper who can always throw one in the net, make an inexplicable mistake. Even when I'm watching United are holding on to a 1-goal lead, I'm like, Jesus Christ, just don't drop something. Back pass, I'm like, don't let this roll over your foot. It must be really difficult for defenders that trust their goalkeeper, that we know what this guy's going to do. He's going to dominate his box. He's going to collect crosses, everything. When you don't have it, I don't know. It must be really difficult.
Yeah, it is, and that's where it's like, these confounding kind of factors that come into play, and that have certainly made things, I think, look a little bit worse in at least for the moment than you would have thought when Amorim first joined, that are a bit out of anybody's control. It's very hard with goalkeepers. It's like kickers in the NFL, like they get the yips, and then you just at some point they got to work out of it. It's like trying to figure that out is really difficult. But that is an issue. The human mind
is insane how it works.
I know, and you get a position like that too, where for the 90% of the game they're isolated, they're sitting on their own, left with their thought. It's a very interesting position from a mental perspective compared to the other aspects of football where these things can kind of happen. And you see it with keepers, where it's like they just get a string of these things that go on, and it's like it's more momentum based than practically anything, and sometimes it's hard to claw out of. So a goalkeeper is on their list for summer as well to look at. I mean, they'd even looked at options in January. Bayindir, I think, has performed better last, he against Rangers, against Arsenal, he was good. Against Rangers, he was good. There's still things, he's not the perfect keeper. There's, and he had
I'll tell you what, his name for the most part personifies United's transfer business. Bayindir. Over there, do the Americans use deer as a metaphor for expensive?
It's not so common. It's more like old fashioned, but I'm aware of it. Yeah, so hopefully people listening are aware of it, American as well.
They've always been banned here.
But we have a couple of unique situations like that where probably come summer, one of them's needs to go and bring in a more convincing keeper between Onana and Bayindir. I'd be curious to see if they end up competing a bit more for the rest of the season, because Onana was starting the Europa League games until Thursday, and now Bayindir has taken the Europa League games on top of the cup. So, that worked for United under Jose Mourinho with Sergio Romero, and they just had that relationship between him and De Gea, where Romero was doing the Europa and he was doing the cups, and De Gea was the Premier League keeper, but De Gea was doing well in the Premier League, so it never really changed. It's a good relationship. So maybe that'll end up like that, or maybe we'll end up having a real competition for the Premier League goalkeeper. But I wouldn't be surprised if one goes and one is replaced in the summer with someone that's, I don't know what you would say with keepers, but just a different keeper to come in and hope that we can cut these mistakes out, because they've certainly cost us a number of points at this point in time. Just there's flat out mistakes that you cannot adjudicate for in any other way.
Let me ask you about something that sort of surprised me, and that has been sort of the regression slightly of Kobbie Mainoo. Now, I think Kobbie Mainoo is a magnificent young player. I think he is, I think he's platinum. I think he's just a brilliant football player, and I'm not concerned about him. But it's a bit, strange to me why he's not an Amorim player. I thought Mainoo would be an Amorim player, but there's something that Amorim doesn't like. What do you think it is?
Well, it's a little bit of an interesting one with Kobbie, and I think that Amorim takes a little bit of a different view. Now, to be very clear, Amorim, I think Mainoo has about the 7th most minutes of any player under Amorim. So he's been mostly his starter that he's picked for a lot of games, but there are a couple of factors in this. One is that the biggest one, I think, is fitness. One thing I definitely would note from Ruben Amorim, and that he talked about pace and power up front yesterday in his that's something we lack. You look at the profile of type of players we're looking to bring in. If you watch or follow kind of up on Patrick Dorgu, his physical traits as a 20-year-old are really, really high. It's something that's been commented on before of United, like the losing duels and second to every ball, slow, these types of things. But even with Ugarte, he'll sub him the moment he looks like he's lagging a little bit. The moment he slows down a little bit, he takes him off the pitch. Now, Kobbie Mainoo, I don't know if it's, too much too soon from a physical perspective. When he came in, he had a big injury. He came back last year. The team was absolutely run ragged with injuries. He came in again this season, picked up an injury, and since back, my personal opinion on it is he's just managing him from a fitness and injury perspective, because he does at times look slower than he probably did 2 years ago when you saw him kind of coming out of the academy and ready to break into the first team. He looks a bit slower, and I worry with young players when they're getting muscle injuries and things like that, that you can overdo it where they don't get that, keep that explosiveness, and they end up getting back to back muscle injuries, things like that. So my hope is, my perception of it anyway, is that it's being managed, because I do know that Amorim wants to keep him. He wants him to agree a new deal and to stay and all of that. So that's kind of my perception of it. That doesn't mean Kobbie doesn't need to maybe improve, but that's what I see. He tends to see him like not keeping up with an attacker, and then he gets subbed off the pitch. And so I kind of see it as that physical, measurement that he does, that he seems to be pretty keen on.
Yeah, maybe it's true. I think there's one other thing that sort of stands out to me a bit. Maybe I'm wrong here, but he's obviously learning how to play in Amorim midfield. And I think that sometimes, and it's just instinct, he stays too narrow. So you need to get exploited on the wing. So when the ball's coming out, Kobbie Mainoo's still in a central position. So when they're coming, I watched this against Brighton. I think Kobbie get hooked off at halftime. United were getting targeted down the wings. And I think what, I never knew what a Mazzala was until I looked at Football Manager, by the way. Someone that shifts across, right? From right? And I think that when you are playing that position, wherever you're being attacked from, you have to shift across and be an extra bodies to stop the attack. And I just don't think that comes naturally to Mainoo. So I think that he has to learn about, how to defend in a way that system needs.
Yes.
And he's still a very young player, of course, technically on the ball, exceptional, just brilliant football brain. I really, really like him. And if you look at United's midfield, James, United need to invest in midfield. You're looking at Mainoo, Collier, Ericsson, none of whom cost United a single penny, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Casemiro, who's finished, who United are trying to phase out, obviously. Ugarte, was a relatively modest signing in relation to what's been paid for players over the years. And, obviously Bruno Fernandes, who's been there quite a while. Lots of obviously discussion about Toby Collier. Of course, brilliant goal line clearance, was delighted for him. I'll be completely honest, mate. I would love to see him succeed, but I'm still not excited about Toby Collier.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think he is like circumstantially. If you bought a player that came on and does what he does, and you spent 30-40 million, you'd be going,
what does he do? I mean this honestly, right?
Yeah.
If you were sitting in front of me and you scouted him, and I said to you, describe what he does well.
Yeah, and it would what I would say he does well is as a defensive midfielder, he gets around well. He gets around the pitch well.
So he's fit. He's got a good engine. He runs about.
Yeah, and that's about it. And in possession, I would agree. He's there's been limitations viewed on his possession traits for some time, and if he can develop there's times when he keeps it simple, okay, but then he made a couple pretty decent sized mistakes that United escaped from against Rangers, I think it was. Pretty bad ones, actually, but it happens. I mean, some of that's just age and nervousness and all that. But that's what I would say is he's a I think it's in comparison when you take Casemiro at the present, he's not fit for playing that position. He can't get around the pitch defend in the positions and the spaces that he needs to get to. And so for now, as a young, as a
James, he's
rotational,
21.
yeah, no, I know,
He's not
but
that
I'm just
young.
saying that's pretty
I
much
mean, he's
it,
older than
you
Kobbie
know?
Mainoo. No, I
Yeah,
know, but I mean, I look at this, and we talked about
yeah,
this at the start of the season, where I'm like,
yeah,
if he doesn't play, he has to leave. He's 21. He's at a point
yeah,
now where he should be impacting game.
yeah.
There's so many 21-year-olds around the world that are impacting games,
Agreed,
that are
agreed.
not nervous, that have good. I mean, to me, it's like I understand that transition is difficult to play first
Yeah,
team football, but he's at an age where it's like, I want that kid to succeed, and I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see anything about him that says, if he was playing for Brighton or playing for Bournemouth, would I be
you
saying I
wouldn't buy
want him in
him.
Man United's
No,
midfield?
no,
So he's an option because you don't have another option, but is a Man
correct,
United quality that's, that really is the harsh question. And
correct,
I don't
correct.
know. The answer is, to me, when I see certain young players for the first time, their attributes are obvious. It's like, okay,
Yeah, yep,
this kid's really good at this, 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 this.
yep,
But I look at Toby and I'm like, I, I don't see anything that stands out to me yet.
yep.
And maybe
I look,
that's okay. Maybe
I agree
that
with
makes
you.
him good
I
because he's a
totally do.
midfielder and he doesn't need to stand out. But I just don't see anything that says to me that's a Man United midfielder yet.
I completely agree with you. I do, and I'm being kind to him because he's running about and
Yeah,
contributing and helping, but it's the reality. In the summer, if you're looking at, is he good enough to be your backup six? I don't think so. If you're going to play 2 games a week in big competitions and need to rotate a lot, is he good enough to replace Ugarte in those games? Probably not. I don't think he's going to bring the same quality that you would have in there. Um, for now, it's an upgrade on playing Casemiro, and just physically him being unable to keep up with the demands. But that's about it, and that's fine for the temporary. But look, come summer, you've got young players as well who are young, right? Like they bought, Kone, right, from Africa to bring in. Well, the idea of bringing a player like
where
that
did he
in is
ban
just
from?
from Africa. I just was saying, the African African
What,
players.
where, Kone is Senegalese, isn't he, the kid?
Is it Mali? Is it where he's from?
Oh, is it Mali?
I always get him mixed up. That's why
I wanna do the kid
make
justice.
sure I have it. Yeah, he is from Mali. He's from Mali. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's
Um.
Malayan. Yeah,
Yeah. So they scouted him. They watched him at the younger World Cup. There, he performed very well. And they think, like you say, that there's some outstanding trait that he will bring to the table should they get him into the first team. And so he's playing for the under-21s now. And look, ideally they're going to look at it and say, we hope he can make that step up. And like Mainoo or like other young players, you see something special about him,
yeah.
some special attribute that can bring him up into the senior level. And then, but in that case, you move Collier. You say that's good. But this is where, not to get too far into this discussion, but this is where it's like, it's really, really not a problem for United to sell Collier in the summer and take profit on a player like him. It's really not an issue. It's not like some big bad thing to sell players just because they come from the academy. And in the world of the PSR presently, you've got to be willing to do that. You also need to. It's encouraged, but it's the only way really to keep up with the other teams that are all doing it. It's a revenue stream that doesn't cost the fans anything, and doesn't require taking money from elsewhere. As long as it's of course got to be part of the plan and makes sense. But I think Collier is a really good example of one where you say, if you could sell him in summer for 20 million, you would.
Yeah,
It'd
look,
be a no brainer,
there's clearly nothing wrong with selling young academy graduates who aren't quite at the level you need,
Yeah.
right? That are just below it. And sometimes they need to be sold so they can develop into an Angel Gomez or something like that, so that they can, like Alanga, they can go somewhere else, develop in a different environment. It's not as cutthroat. It's not as pressurized, and you become a much better player. But if you're selling academy players that clearly are good enough out of necessity because that's what you need to fund your football club, then you become a football club that does that. And football clubs that sell to survive don't succeed
Yeah.
because you can't have both. I
Yes,
mean, I
correct.
remember under
Correct.
our,
Yes.
Wenger, when they built this new stadium, we have to sell players to pay for the stadium, and they would lose Fabregas, they would lose Ashley Cole, they would lose all their best young players coming through. As soon as they got to a certain level, they just got picked off, picked off, picked off. This
Yeah.
big football club, it just became, and then they would buy players that were just nowhere near the same level. Well, that's why they were cheaper, right? And so that's how they ended up with like the Stepanovs, and that's how you ended up with the Kim Kallstrom and stuff like that. Because top players are not going to come to your football club if your model is we want to develop to sell you. That's principle priority number one. You
Yes,
can't build a
correct.
football club like that, a football team like that.
Yeah.
And the players that play for your club will start playing for themselves. I'm just playing to get a move. Okay. I don't
Mhm.
really care if we win or lose. If you go down, I'm not going down with you. If you finish outside the top four, I don't care. I'm moving at the end of the season anyway. So this is something that when I look at United, I've become concerned about, because you've got players taking the pitch that you're asking to rely on to give 100%. So we're in a positive position in May, but you're also telling them if a decent offer comes in, you're out the door. We want rid of you. I mean, how do you have any commitment collectively to a goal that your employer is telling you the only thing that's separating you from the door is someone making a decent, half decent offer? So you're just a commodity to me. You're just, we're not going to build a team around you. Don't plan for your kids' future here. Don't, because we would be happy to sell you. I mean, to me, I think you lose your identity when if Barcelona were going to sell Gavi, Pedri, and Lamine Yamal, because to me, you're not, what makes Barcelona great is gone. Now,
Sure.
I don't want to be dramatic. United in 1858 lost 8 of their team. Matt Busby said that
Yeah.
was his best ever team. And within a decade, they had rebuilt and won the European Cup. We're in a different era, so that's hard to do now. But I just wonder what is going to be left when, what needs to be done to make United solvent, and what do they look
Yeah.
after that? Does it
Well,
resemble anything that
yeah.
because I'm worried, James. Like, I look at these ticket prices increases, I look at what happened with the Rangers fans, the Galatasaray fans, the disabled budget, supporters budget getting cut, the cutbacks, the minor cutbacks here, there, it just looks like a football club that's hollowing out its soul.
Yeah, and look, I think that there's part of the thing is I think that it's hard to not conflate everything together that's going on too, because there's things that are, there's things as fans that obviously that every fan, especially match goers and things, have an absolute right to be concerned about and to worry about, because it's going to directly
Well, yeah,
affect them,
they're
their
the ones paying for the
experience and
tickets.
relationship with the club, and they're paying, right? They are the paying customers, and I think that they
Mm-hmm.
have a right to these kinds of things. When it comes to some of like the sales and the academy stuff, I think and as well the team, I think there's kind of two different perspectives on this, which is number one, it's about like acute versus chronic in terms of the decision making process. It's about short versus long term, in terms of the decision making process overall. It has to be said that, the biggest criticism of United, what I find a little bit tricky is, like, you take the biggest criticism of United is they've poorly spent, poorly built their team and put it all together. So when new management comes in and says, we're going to build the team correctly, we're going to build the team right, we're going to build a team the way that we want to, right? Well, 80% of the team isn't players that they've signed. So this idea, anybody's, all these guys are for sale, they could go, all of that.
Mm.
I think it's fair in the short term because we didn't sign you. It's just a reality of
Well,
it,
they didn't
and
sign him, but the club did.
correct. But in the current transition, if they're looking and saying, well, look, the club's been doing this
They
chaos
don't play for
for
Jim Ratcliffe,
10
mate.
years. No, I understand, but they do play for, but they did the guys who are in there, Barada, Wilcox, the people running the football side of it, have to be able to shape the squad in the image of what they
Yeah,
think
of
it makes the
course.
most sense, right? And so there's in the short term, there's a lot of players who don't fit that. you know,
Okay.
that they didn't sign, that they didn't bring in, that, you know, that they're being saddled with, essentially, that they might not think is good enough, or that they may not think
Okay.
fits the direction they want to go. They have to
N-
be able to deal with that.
Mate, no question. Okay. But you have to look at the consequences of that. If you're going to say to your players, we got saddled with most of you, but hey, go ahead and give me 100% here today against Bournemouth and make sure we qualify for the champ. What? I'm a liability to you. You got saddled
Yeah,
with
I
me,
mean, but
and then you want me
this
to go
is
out
the
and give it. No,
challenge.
but there's a reality to this, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to go and ask that human being to take the field and give 100% for a club. I mean, what is Manchester? Is it Jim Ratcliffe, or is it Manchester? Does Jim Ratcliffe
Of
have a
course.
responsibility to adhere to certain values and principles that are commensurate with the club? I think he does.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you deserve a football club that resembles someone that sees players purely as a transaction. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you do. Just go on and field and play. And when you no longer provide any value to me or worth, you're out. So to me, I think it's about there's a way to treat human beings. Every footballer, every human being that works for someone knows that there's always a threshold where you're going to get sacked or whether you're going to. Everyone
Yeah.
knows, right? The unstated reality of the relationship. So it doesn't need to be. And footballers will act in their own best interest too. But there's a reality to be faced at the same time that to build morale amongst people. Okay, it's it's more they have the environment that you produce. It requires a sense of nourishment from the employer, that it's not just, hey, you'll see your thank you on a check. No, I'm a human being. Because if it
I
becomes that,
understand you.
then I only play for I don't care about your team. I only care about me. Okay, and if I'm incentivized to only care about myself and only care about my own personal success and not the team. Imagine you're Patrick Dorgu, son. You're coming into a football club that 6 months from now, if you have tough 6 months, we're going to say we're going to listen to the offers for you, and everybody in this football club has been told that they're really surplus. But we're going to do great. Like I don't think that
Yeah,
you can do
I
that.
hear that, but I don't particularly think that's really how it goes. I mean, I think that in that vein, that is correct, but I'm not sure I quite buy all the stories that are out there, because you have a couple of problems here, and I think a lot of this
Which
is
ones? Which ones do
um,
not?
I don't think that United have at all briefed that, everybody is for sale, and we're going to accept an offer if anything comes in for
They haven't
anyone.
briefed against it.
Well, they kind of did. I mean, there was a story about specifically Garnacho and Mainoo that came through, the saying, that they would have to consider it, or things like that kind of came in. Then the next few days, there was one saying they're specifically not pushing them out the club and trying to
But
sell
mate,
them
they're on the verge of
a
selling
couple of days
Garnacho.
later. Yes, I understand, but it is not there's reasons for it. That is not at the behest. Like,
So
Omar
you have
Barad
to say
has
that
a
story was correct.
not
The
really.
story
I
that
don't think it
they
was.
wanted this that if Garnacho was not for sale, there wouldn't be discussions. It would be just that's
Of
it.
course.
So well, we're not
Of
interested in
course.
selling that player.
But
So therefore, it's a
I don't
complete
think there's
contradiction
such
to
a
the story
thing
that
as
was
a
out there.
player not being for sale, though. I don't think that,
Yeah, but
exists,
also, yeah, I know. But mate, the thing is that every business, their assets are for sale at an exorbitant
Of
price.
course.
Everyone knows that, right?
Yeah.
But what Garnacho's price isn't that exorbitant. And if United weren't desperate to sell him, they certainly wouldn't be selling him to Chelsea. So now United fans are going to have to deal with one of their top young talents going to Chelsea because United need the money. And I don't care. I judge you on what you do, not what you say. You can say those stories are false, but then you're selling the kid anyway. I'm sorry, that story's true. I
Well,
mean,
but I
Mainoo,
don't.
okay,
I
but
can't agree with it. I can't agree with it, because Garnacho wouldn't go to
sure.
Chelsea if he didn't want to leave United. He
Well,
has a
no, it's a
choice in the
two-way
matter.
street, but that's what I'm
You
saying. If
know.
you tell a player, listen, I'm okay with selling you, I'm going to go. If my
Sure.
employer comes in to me and says, hey, you know what?
But what if the coach
There's one of our
does? Who's got the right to it? Like, I want to take it a little bit off the ownership, because Sir Jim hasn't walked in and said we have to sell Garnacho. I guarantee that. I know it for a fact.
well, no, but
He's
what
not
he
he's not done anything like that.
no, but I'm sure what he said is there's pretty much nobody off the table. If somebody makes a reasonable
Sure.
offer, they can go. And I'm sure he's had some of this. I may be predicated by Amorim saying I have to sell so that I can bring in players
Yeah.
that are specific to the system.
Correct.
That's fine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's totally fine. But if you look at the premise of that question, I can't recruit a player until I sell one of our best young players. Now, here's the thing, James. If you're going to sign a player that's equivalent to Garnacho in value, you're going to be paying a lot more in wages. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So you
that
have
is
to
true.
downgrade
Yeah.
to save.
Yeah.
Right. So now what do you got to do? You got to go get a young player that's not at Garnacho's level, or an older player, that's had a couple of bumps. You're taking account because the top players, in that bracket, you got to pay more. You're going to pay. End up costing you more, and it's like, to me, I don't know how you can build any type of camaraderie in a business that's saying to its employees, "We got you on a Black Friday sale."
Well, I hear it. I hear it. I think there's part of the problem is there's really no array around that circumstance, because it's like it's a situation as created out of the reality of what is,
No, I know, and
and
so you have to deal with the consequence of what is. You
yeah,
can't afford to keep a
of
squad.
course. So,
So
but that's what I'm saying. I don't think they're really particularly doing anything wrong with it. It is a consequence of these many years of kind of mismanagement, and that's where I say, like,
okay,
I'm not. Go
understandable. But
ahead.
that's what you
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah.
Then you can't build a team that can compete. It's as simple as that. If that's the reality that you're faced with, then what the emergent property of that situation, that scenario, is you can't build a squad. You cannot build a collective togetherness to win trophies when you're always on the market. There has to be some sense of security with
Of
your that
course.
says I'm complete, because every goal you're fighting for is months away.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting in January and going, I may not be here in the summer, then naturally a human being is going to become selfish and solipsistic and focus on their own, because that's what they're being told. Now, I want to move us on a second to Amorim's comments yesterday about Marcus Rashford, to emphasize my point
Yeah.
on that.
Yep.
So Manchester United aren't speaking like a football club that wants to keep a hold of these players.
Correct.
Okay, there's
Agreed
no
on
one
that
coming out
front.
and
Sure.
saying, so Ruben Amorim's admitted Garnacho, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Anthony, we don't know what's going to happen. If someone comes in for Casemiro, he's gone. If someone comes in, put 100 million on the table for Mainoo, that's the reality, right? And then I saw what Amorim said yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's far worse than anything Ten Hag said about Sancho.
Sure.
And here's why I think it's
Yeah, it
unfair.
is.
Marcus Rashford has no opportunity for a right to reply. Jadon Sancho's right of reply was pinned to his Twitter page.
Sure.
So a player can be attacked like that publicly, but have no ability to respond and defend their position. And if they do respond and defend their position publicly in the same arena that they were attacked in, then they get suspended. Now, to me, let's say Ruben Amorim is correct. I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are going to be angry because I'm defending Rashford, and that's fine. My point is this. Even if Ruben Amorim is right about every single thing, I don't understand how that helps United trying to move a player on, which is now created a greater risk to taking him. Okay, because you're not attacking him as a football, you're attacking him as a human being. I don't understand. What if he doesn't get sold? How does that relationship get repaired? I don't understand, for a guy who's been so measured, why that has any benefit. This is a guy that a week ago had to come out and apologize and say, hey, I'm young, I make mistakes, I say things I regret, and then you go in and say something like that about one of your players. I think Marcus Rashford should leave Manchester United. I felt that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But to me,
agreed.
I think that was completely unnecessary. It plays well with certain people and the fans because they want to hear that it gives them some sense of pleasure. But you don't deal with problems publicly. You deal with them privately. And to me, Marcus Rashford got slaughtered for doing a pretty benign interview a while ago. And he doesn't speak in the media typically. He doesn't use, other people to disseminate messages. So what is he supposed to do in a situation like that? How is he supposed to respond? Because we know, I know, that I know, there's obviously they're very hurt by it. And
Yeah,
there's other details that provide context to this particular story that really transcend Ruben Amorim.
of
That goes
course.
back way further.
Yeah,
So Marcus
yeah,
Rashford's relationship, first of all, with his employer
yeah,
is not the best for very, very, very good reason, by the way, right?
yeah.
But to me, I felt that was unnecessary.
Yeah, and you know, and like I said, I when you kind of first gave an interview, it was also, as I recall, off the back of stories going out there. And this is, you know, part of my argument about like the messaging that's out there is, how would I put this? Because I don't actually disagree with you even in the slightest that I don't want things going out there. You know, everybody's for sale, blah, 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 things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like those stories. I don't think they provide any benefit. I don't think they're any good at all. I think privately, the club has to be able to have that position, of course, like
Of
anybody
course,
does. They have to privately be able to have that. You don't want the club going out and briefing everybody's for sale, everybody's available, right? You don't. It does. I don't see what good it does for anybody, right? When that happens, it happened last year. It happened 2 years ago. It's actually happened every single year prior to Ineos coming in as well. We've gotten stories in January about how everyone in the squad is for sale. I remember I went and looked at it when some of these things came out, and I sit there and I go, why does this keep happening? Like, why do these stories
mm-hmm.
keep getting out there? Because Rashford's interview, just tying it to that in the first place, came off the back of stories after he was left out saying he's for sale in January. And
Why
up
are we
until
even
that
still
point,
talking about him after games? He hasn't
right,
played since Pilsen.
exactly.
Like, why every
Yeah,
fucking game? Marcus Rashford this,
yeah.
Marcus Rashford this, Marcus.
I
Like,
know.
he's not playing. Can we talk?
So,
Can we speak about something other
yeah,
than this? Why are you asking? Like,
yeah.
this is and what if he moves? He's a scumbag. If he stays, he's a scum. I mean, this to me, it's like,
Yeah.
why do people insist on making this an issue after every game?
Yeah, and this is sort of my general point on it overall, right? Is that one, I quite know for a fact that the management in place would rather not have any stories about players being for sale or anything like that. They don't want those stories going out there. I can tell you that for sure. Now, there's obviously a lot of people at United. There's a lot of people at United. So there are going to be people with different perspectives who speak to different people and say different things. But I can tell you for sure they don't really want anything out there about selling players and about these situations. I don't think the story that initially came out when Garnacho and Rashford were both dropped for City about him being for sale before his interview was something that a number of people wanted out there.
Are they
Um,
completely inept in communicating in PR?
No, I don't think so. But I also think that, you know, it's a big club with a lot of people who
Has
talk.
Ruben Amorim ever
Um,
said, "Oh, these players aren't for sale"? Has Jim Ratcliffe ever said, "Oh, these players aren't for sale"? Has Omar Barat?
no,
I mean,
but they're not.
how
I
long
don't
would it
think
take?
that they're going to. I don't think that they're
Why not?
going to. It's just not the way that they deal with it. I mean, it's
Okay,
just,
so but
you
then
know,
the
when you
story's out
start
there.
briefing against, you know, like I'm not saying I necessarily agree with all of it, but I don't think you can go brief against every story that comes out. You know,
No,
because
but that's
there's
significant,
hundreds of
James.
them
That's
all the time.
I agree, but that's significant. That's a story that to me deserves a response.
And
Now, these are the same people that turned around and had no problems with the fact that Casemiro was constantly used as an example of bad business. Like, to me, if I'm Jim Ratcliffe, I would be embarrassed by it. I would go, I know this example, even if I felt this way,
yeah,
I would
yeah.
be, this guy is an employee of my football club, and this is no way to treat a human being. Like, if the people that were buying the business that I worked for were constantly using my hire as an
But
example
who
of being,
leaked that in the first place? It's sort of,
well,
you know,
but
is a matter
regardless
because
of
that
who
was
leaked
even
it, it
before
deserves
they
a,
bought the
but
club, you know?
James, regardless of who leaked it, it deserves a response. That's something that owners should be communicating. No, that is unacceptable. That did not happen, and we're completely committed. Even if you think that, like, to me, that is something that if my employer is silent over that story constantly circulating, that's a response to me. That is a response that says I'm comfortable with that being a. Yeah, they can find their voice when they want, no problems. They're comfortable with that. That could have been dismissed by a manager. Could have been dismissed by Jim Ratcliffe, Bill Barada. They've all done interviews. They've all talked to fan form. That should have been, to me, an important. And then this is what happens. We have lots of these stories about players, about this, he being the worst team ever, or this guy doesn't train right, or this guy. Like, to me, if these stories are correct, fine. But if they're not correct, where you're using someone as an example of bad business, that to me is, I mean, how can you ask that guy to go out and give everything for a club and for owners that have turned around and said, you are an example of the fucking ineptitude that infested this football club? Before, like, I don't know, man. I'm sorry. Like, that is not there. Maybe I don't understand human psychology, but from what I do know, I don't think that's something that I would want anyway. I just think they've had a nightmare PR-wise. I've been distinctly unimpressed. I think that they never properly responded to, the Disabled Supporters Association budget being cut. They never properly responded to all the stories about gift cards and about this and that. They just have never felt compelled to come out. I mean, Jim's happy to talk about the America's Cup. Like, to me, it's about, you made a promise on your submission statement, your bid offering statement, about putting the Manchester back in Manchester. And I have no doubt that this thing would have happened anyway. But as we saw yesterday after the game at Fulham, where Jim Ratcliffe was given a mouthful and given a mouthful by the fans, and his honeymoon period is over, you have a duty of care to behave with a certain level of conduct and respect that is analogous with United's identity. And if the business that you bought requires you to abandon all that so you can become solvent, then what have you got left?
Yeah, look, I this is where I think there's two different aspects to it, because I think that when it comes to the communication with fans and things like that, I think there's more that has to be done, on that front to get it. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to take these decisions. That doesn't mean they're still not going to do the same things that they're doing from a decision standpoint, because from their perspective and evaluation, they may not feel they have a
Sure.
choice.
Agreed.
But I do
Agreed.
agree on
100%.
the communication aspect. I think what's very clear, though, when it comes to the football side, is I don't believe they think they should have to explain every football decision to the fans in the way that that some people want. Because part of it, Phil, is I look at it and I look at what's out there, and it's, they don't spend in January. It's, you fucking bastards. You don't spend. You're cheap. You're
Yeah,
you're
that's different, man.
withholding money. All
That's
of that. No, but hold on. But then if a story goes out and it says, well, we got to sell this player to buy, you fucking bastards. You're selling academy players for money. You're how does this work? All of that. It's like, it's a no-win situation if they say anything, about it when it comes
I
to the
don't agree,
football
mate.
commentary. I
I
and I
agree
think
with the
that,
two examples you provided.
yeah.
That you don't need to respond to that. But when you're talking about the whole teams for sale, I think you do. And when you're constantly having stories circulated about, even before the cup final with Ten Hag,
Yeah, I agree with that,
Shearer got
completely, by
his
the way,
balls
for what it's
chewed
worth,
for,
yeah.
for Shearer got
Yeah,
his ass chewed for asking to,
yeah,
but the only people that could have addressed that question
yeah,
was the owners.
yeah.
And then, but it's just been this consistent, discipline. I could have been handled better. I could have been communicated better. That could have been. And so, to me, like, when I'm looking at this, and when you're specific about a human being like Casemiro and whatever, I think that does need addressed by your bosses. Not if you're silent. I mean, I'm sorry, man. Maybe I'm overly sensitive, but that would really bother me if I'm a four-time European Cup winner and my employer is not doing anything to address the repeated rumor that, anyway. So we can.
I get
I
you
agree that they have
on
to make
some of
tough
that
decisions.
stuff,
I
but
agree they
I
have to
do
make tough
think that
decisions.
I do think that at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, is that no matter what they do, until we are good, it's sort of it's sort of whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's always going to be overly critiqued, overly analyzed until that point in time, because at the end of the day, you got to win football matches. At the end of the day, you have to be successful on the pitch to justify the decisions. And I guess that's to me is like, I don't know. There's definitely mistakes. Like I figure, the whole Ten Hag, obviously communication around that I thought was really poor. I thought it was really poor. But I also think they should have just pulled the plug a lot earlier.
But
But
the
you had
same with the ticket
fans
price
writing
increase.
10,000 letters to them saying you got to
Yeah.
keep the manager. Like you're gonna deal with criticism heavily, no matter what you do, on this front. Because fans are not going to agree with your decisions, and that doesn't mean the fans are right on the football. I'm separating topics out, and it's tough. It's
Well,
I can understand the perspective of let's just not say anything and be quiet, and
I
we'll
don't.
talk to players in house. I can understand that perspective from a
I
football
I would.
standpoint.
I don't. I think that even from a business perspective, and we'll move on from this, I think it's bad business not to say anything. I think because it leaves the impression out there that your players you're desperate to get rid of them, and I think that needs to be, to me, like there has to be some sense of communication from the club that says you're not going to exploit our financial position. These are prized possessions.
Sure.
And again, the way they communicated the ticket prices increase, a total disgrace, like a total disgrace. And to me, it's you want fans to share in the responsibility of the debt. Do fans get to share the profits? Never.
Yeah.
So the debt is shared and publicized, but the profits are privatized
Yeah.
because this is where fans have every right to be upset and say, "Hang on a minute,
Of course.
we understand the financial situation of the club through no fault of our own, okay? Because we're the only ones that didn't get paid, but we got to pay for it. But whenever this football club's become profitable, do we get a share in the profits since we help pay your debt? I mean, the Glazers will. But so to me, I have fans every right to be upset, and I just think
I
like
would agree on these fronts. Yeah.
I just think that maybe that could be handled by a manager. Anything. I just don't know how you build an environment where players you're anyway. It's tautological. I've exhausted this. Anything else I've missed, mate? That I haven't talked about that I can think of.
No, I mean we touched on obviously them wanting to get Dorgu in the market, but if anything else happens, if it's
They're
probably
looking
pretty
for a forward.
unlikely. But yeah, aside from if Garnacho goes, can they get a forward in the door, and what kind of forward can they get in the last
They
days
better
of the
admit
window?
they cannot go in
Yeah,
the second half of the season with Ahmad, whether Marcus Rashford's there or not, Rasmus Højlund, Xerxes.
and
I
Bruno, and
mean,
that's it. Yeah,
and yeah, it's
it's
just
not
nowhere near
enough.
enough. You've already
Yeah,
got rid of
not even
Anthony. You've
close.
already, you simply, if you're in a position where you can't afford footballers, then you're not a football club. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if there's definitely no doubt they cannot lose Garnacho without replacement. That would be inexcusable in the situation.
Yep.
They have to. It's short
Chelsea
enough
are
as
going to
it
do
is.
them, mate. Chelsea are going to wait till around deadline day,
Oh
and
yeah,
they're going to come
I'm
in
sure
for
they
him,
will.
and they'll try to pass some Kunku off. They'll try to get rid of players they don't want to get the price down, and they'll
Yeah,
exploit United's desperation. And I can see a situation where Inos approve a sale and say, okay, we'll just recruit in the summer. And I think you're asking that squad wasn't
I
good
don't
enough
think
for
they
the room.
will.
And
I
well,
th-
but here's the thing, James. Okay, let's say they don't. Who are you lining up as a deadline day move that you would have bought in the summer?
I
Because you
don't
can
think
only
they'll
look
sell
at that
him.
and say,
Yeah. I don't think
you
they'll
don't think
sell
they'll
him,
sell him?
honestly. I honestly think the odds have dropped off pretty significantly of them selling him at this point in time in January.
Mm.
Because of that exact thing is that you don't really have an option. I mean, you can explore someone like Cunha from Wolves that everybody's looking at and looking at offers. You're going to pay a lot of money for him. They may not sell him anyway. At best, what you get back from Chelsea, because they're not going to buy Nkunku, they're not going to buy João Felix. They might take a loan of them, maybe plus a bunch of money at worst. But I think it's day by day it gets less likely. It's just my opinion on that front. But they did turn down 55 million from Napoli, and so I don't think they're in a situation where they're really just going to flog him just to have the money to spend in summer. Um, I think they have to have something lined up, and I'm not sure that they can. I think the focus will go on Patrick Dorgu getting it done, and then they'll kind of quietly end the window there, and that's probably the best circumstance for it, because I don't think we can get a replacement that makes in January
Yeah.
for Garnacho right now. I don't think we can. I'm not sure how we would be able to.
Yeah,
unless you
it's
get creative with Osimhen and Napoli, but it feels like that's really difficult. I mean, that's one of the only circumstances out there I can see that maybe you could figure something out of a good player, but that still seems really difficult.
yeah. Well, we'll see, Matt. We will see, my friend. It's good to get back doing this with you, matey. It's been a while.
Yes.
It's thanks to all of you for checking with me over the last couple of weeks. I have a ton of private messages which I haven't got back to. My apologies. I will get to them eventually. We'll be back again next week. Don't forget, my friend here puts out content all week, so stay tuned. We'll be back again next week. Take it easy, man.
See you later.
All right, James.